Hi everyone. Woo! I'm so excited to be here. Wow, my name is Clementina Busayo. I'm the author of the book titled Profitable Usherpreneur. And today is my book launch. I'm super excited because I got the opportunity to connect with these amazing authors across the world. They're going to be introducing themselves to us shortly, but I'm going to be giving a background to why we are doing this. So, like I said, my name is Clementina Busayo. I'm the author of Profitable Usherpreneur book, and I'm also the founder of Glorious Ushering Services. And for Glorious Ushering Services, what we basically do is that we teach the business of ushering. We also train ushers to be professionals, and we provide ushering services for events. So this is the day one of the Usherpreneur book launch and summit. And today I'm privileged to be joined by authors across the world. They're going to be telling us their names, where they are at, the books they wrote, what inspired the book, and for us today, the focus is the art of storytelling. So, because personally for me, I realized that a lot of people that I've been able to connect with online, do business with, is because eventually we realize that we are human and we share something in common. And I've been privileged to read from both authors, and I know that the content they share is genuine, like it's their experience. Both authors actually wrote what is known as Mayokun wrote what is known as a memoir, and Krista also did the same thing. She wrote basically about her life, how she went from public housing to Ivy League, and we're going to be hearing all about that. So I'm so excited. If you're here with us, I'd like for you to use the comment section, and if you eventually get to watch this replay, all you need to do is to introduce yourself by telling us your name, telling us where you're watching us from, and as we go by, you can ask us questions or also drop the lessons you learned from this section. So, welcome to the Entrepreneur Book Summit and launch. This is the heart of storytelling, and today I'm going to be introducing my first guest. His name is Adekola Mayokun. Mayokun, welcome. How are you today?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. And my second
Congratulations on
guest.
your. Oh, sorry. I was going to say congratulations on your book and launch, and
Yes,
it's nice to meet you guys.
thank you, thank you. And my second guest is Krista. Krista, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. And like Mayokun said, congratulations. This is a big event. So I pray that you have celebrated or you are celebrating this tremendous milestone. I'm doing well.
Thank you. So I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves in their own words. I know if you've been following the event, you will see on the side of the Entrepreneur Book Launch and Summit their profile, where they've been, what they've done, and you can also connect with them. So I would not want to read that out again. I would want them to introduce themselves in their own words. So, Mayokun, can we hear you?
uh, okay, did you say Mayokun?
Mayokun.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you, commentator. So my name is Mayokun Adekola. Um, I'm an author and wrote my first book, published my first book last year in 2020 December. It's called The Immigrant. I mean, you know, the immigrant's memoir, essentially, as Clementina said, is what the book is largely about. Now, the title of the book itself is "Can You Hear Me?" and then the subtitle is "The Immigrant's Memoir." But I'll actually explain it's a memoir. It explains my journey to the States from Nigeria and the culture shocks that I had. Um, and it covers everything, well, almost everything, every kind of culture shock I experienced, from people to food to weather, and just try to present that. And of course, when I'm not writing, I have a full time job. I work. I work as a construction engineer. Um, and then I've lived in the US and Canada. I'm very involved in cultures and, understanding cultures and people, um, and just immersing myself in the experience of people and trying to see from that perspective how we can tell a story about it. What I've, found out is many stories are actually similar. People are supposedly widely different, but at the end of the day, a lot of times at the very bottom of it, our stories are similar, or at least the stories that we all aspire to. So sometimes the start of our stories are not the same. That is what is varied, but what everybody wants a lot of times is basically the same thing. So I realized that a good story is universal, and a lot of people try to relate to that. So that's what I try to do. So, like I said, yep, other than when I'm working in the office or working on a job site and I'm not writing, I guess I'm either sleeping or playing games.
Amazing. Awesome. Before we continue, Mayokun, did you ever consider yourself an author? Because I realized that a lot of times many times where we have this mindset and roadblocks is because we do not see ourselves as something. So for a long time, we hold ourselves back. Did you ever consider yourself an author?
I'm not sure that I would say that I was able to boldly wear that cap until a book was published. And, I mean, it's published now, so I guess you can as well be an author. But before that, I knew I had a flair for writing. I had taken on some projects in the past, as far back as when I was in secondary school. I'd written some books that will never be published by God's grace, because in hindsight, I don't want that to be published, but at least I made an attempt. And so I'd written books at the time at my level, maybe as far back as primary school, even before I was 10 years old. Yes, I had taken on some writing adventures, but obviously none suffice enough to see myself as an author. Um, but I always knew that there was a story I wanted to tell, and there were things I wanted to write about. So yes, I wasn't able to boldly wear that cap until eventually I, put pen to paper and published.
Awesome. Thank you so much, my Crystal. Can we meet you, please?
Yeah, of course. Just like Mayokun, I basically never really considered myself an author until the first book was published. But I guess I'll start with a little bit of my background. So my name is Crystal Harrell. I was born and raised in southern Alabama, a small town called Ozark, very rural. And my mom moved there from Miami, Florida, from Fort Lauderdale, which is a very rough city or part of Miami, Florida. And so, with me and my 9 other siblings, my mom raised us in public housing in rural Alabama. And from there, I went to school. So, I got my undergrad in sociology, and I stayed there to complete my first master's in human development and family studies, and then later transitioned to the public health field. So I got a second master's in epidemiology and now studying at Yale University for my doctoral degree in public health. And I also serve part-time in the US Armed Forces. Writing my book, Crystal Clear, A Journey of Self-Discovery, was me sharing a piece of who I am with more people, because I became certified as an academic success coach in 2019. And every student who approached me or reached out to me wanted to know the same thing. They always asked me, how did you do it? And so I realized that having a story and telling a story was a powerful tool to actually transform lives. And so even though I was dealing with a lot as a first year PhD student, when I decided to finish my book, my first book, I knew that it was greater than me. And I knew that this was something that had to be done so that I could help make an impact in this world. So I published Crystal Clear, A Journey of Self-Discovery from Public Housing to Ivy League in March of 2021. And it reached #1 bestseller on Amazon for a week or so. And then I've been invited on a few podcasts to talk about the book, but my main thing is just to inspire and to transform lives. And at the end of the day, I really believe that, my story is to inspire people to realize that there's nothing that you can't accomplish when your head is in the right place.
Is to inspire people nothing they can't accomplish as long as they have their head in the right place. Did I get it correctly?
I don't think I caught the whole thing. It kind of skipped out.
Okay. I was just trying to recap the last thing you said about there is nothing we can't accomplish as long as we have our head in the right place. So I wanted to be sure I got you clearly when you said that.
Yes, and what I mean by that is just essentially developing the right mindset to understand the possibilities and the potential that you have as a human being, because there are so many people who had stories very similar to mine where they grew up in disadvantaged neighborhoods, like Les Brown, Lisa Nichols. Like, these people came from very adverse beginnings and very humble beginnings, but they were able to achieve ginormous success, and it all comes down to your mindset. What stories are you telling yourself about who you are and what's possible for you? And so that's what I mean about having your head in the right place, is having your mindset developed to a mindset of success.
Thank you so much for that. I'm very grateful. I want to say thank you to two of you for joining today. And what we're going to be talking about is just telling your story. So personally, for me, why I wanted to have both of you come to talk about this topic is, like I said, I've read extracts from your book, and I understand that this is your experience. And for me, starting an ushering business and with the focus of teaching people how to navigate the business came as a tricky um, road, because I found that I had to learn while doing what I needed to do. So I had to learn how to build a team, I had to learn how to source for my fabrics, I had to learn how to pitch to customers, and I had to learn how to craft and build my portfolio. And as I went through all of that, I told myself that if only there was a book to actually just tell me what to do, even if the book did not give me everything I needed. At least if I saw a book, I felt I would have been inspired to know that I was not alone. It was really lonely. It was very alien, because for a long time I could not even understand what I was doing. I just knew that I loved what I was doing, but much more than loving what I was doing. And in those 4 years, we've been able to engage over 20 ushers, and some of these ushers have gone back to school, gotten new certificates, gotten new jobs, and sometimes they reach out to say, "Oh, it was because I worked with you, I'd love to work with you again." And the moment it dawned on me that what I was doing was making a difference, I knew that it was going to be unfair for me to give up, because I could not figure it out. Because by giving up, I actually make other people, I put them. I want you to tell us why is our story, especially by ourselves, is it necessary? Is it something that we should wait for our kids or somebody that might have observed our life to do? Why do you think it's important for us to tell our story?
I think you might
Michael,
need
you want to go
to.
first, please?
Yeah, I think you might need to repeat the question. The connection seems a little bit unstable.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's much better.
Okay. So I was saying that why is it important for us to tell our stories, especially by ourselves? Why shouldn't we outsource that part to other people or leave it to chance? Why is it important for us to tell our stories the way we want it to be told?
Feel free to go first.
Can you hear
Feel
me?
free to go first.
Yeah. Okay. I was actually waiting for you, Crystal, to go
Oh,
first. Well, okay. Yeah, it is very important for us to be the ones to tell our stories. And one of the, one thing I'd say about that is that was one of the things that inspired me to write a story. And what you were talking about, Clementina, when you said you got into the ushering business, and there was a lot for you to navigate, there was a lot for you to understand, and at some point you felt if only there was someone who had written about this. Now, of course, that takes me to the famous quote. Everybody knows that, Toni Morrison: if there is something that you like to read that has not been written, just go write it. um, Essentially, that was the same reason I wrote a book. It was the fact that I did explain that you know I was with a couple of guys, and we were talking about our experiences as immigrants to the United States. Now, for those of us in that group, we had a lot in common in the sense that we were largely from Nigeria, and the other people were from like Africa and maybe some parts of Asia. We all kind of fell within the same economic bracket where we were coming from. So we had a lot of similar experiences. And then, initially when you share those experiences with your Nigerian friends, that sounds very relatable. And then you get to share with some guy from say India or Pakistan, and you realize that there's a lot in your story that looks alike. And then you get your Mexican friend to talk about our parents and our parents, experience and how they do stuff in their house. And you're almost like, are you describing your house or you're describing mine? Like this is what can happen in my family. I had a Colombian friend describe our father's farm and how they used to go to their our father's farm recreationally and how they would roast corn and roast ham. And I'm like, wait, are you saying your father's farm or mine? Because that happened when I was growing up. And then you just see the connection between all the stories, and it was interesting, and every other thing that I saw with that. And then I thought to myself, why not write this? Why not put this story together and let people be able to read it? And of course, it was extremely important that I write it myself, because one of the things I discovered at the time too, I think I told a story in one of my live broadcasts. I'd gone to the library in my school, and I saw books about everything. Like practically, one of the things that I realized when I moved to the States was the fact that there was almost information on everything. I mean, there is information on how to use a credit card to open a jam door. There is a book, someone has written a book about how to use a jotter to wrap some, like you can almost Google anything and you find something about it. And I got into the library that day and I saw a section that had a compilation of books, and the books would say all you need to know about, and it would tell a country. So it had like all you need to know about Tanzania, all you need to know about Burundi, all you need to know about this. And then of course I saw all you need to know about Nigeria, and it was written by a Caucasian couple. So the thought came to mind. I'm like, it was a small book. Obviously, it wasn't all you needed to know about Nigeria, but they were tourists. They traveled around the world, and so they will just put together a quick book on the basic things that you needed to know if you're visiting the country. And then I told myself, well, I mean, that's what they wanted to do. You really can't fault them. Like they decided to write this story. Now, I what I saw was there was a lot of reaction to that when people write stories like that, and the people say, "Oh well, you just visited Nigeria or Burundi for 3 weeks or 1 month, and you think you can write all you need to know about it. You're writing our stories, blah blah blah." That's not well. Write it yourself. No one's holding you. So that's what I decided to do. Is the fact that I had an immigrant story. It was reminiscent with many other immigrant stories. I found a union to it. And at this point, I'd been in the States a long time enough to know that if you don't write the story, someone's going to write it. And if they write it, they might not write exactly what your story was. It's going to have their twist. Now, whether or not they like it, it's not going to be, it might not be because they're being malicious or anything, but we all have our own biases, or at least the viewpoints that, set us up once we begin to tell a story. So if you wanted that story to be told exactly the way it is and exactly the way it is in your mind, well, then you have to get up and go write it. So it was because at that point I realized that there would be a story about everything. I'd been opened up to the fact that there's just some information out there about everything. I'm sure that right now, if you wanted to, thankfully, right now, if you wanted to start an ushering business, Clementina has written a book. So if you put up something, you're going to find a book about it. I think that one of the things the stories do, obviously, we've touched on that, is to inspire people and to empower them. And I believe that we're being responsible if we're contributors to that, to let people understand. That's why I wrote the story, to just let people see from my point of view. And then, of course, from the point of view of a lot of other immigrants like me, what it looks like to settle in a first world country. There's the fact that we have to tell the stories, otherwise, someone's going to tell it for you. And if they do, if they tell it with their own biases or their own twist, you're really not going to have a lot you can do about it.
Thank you so, so much. You know, the word you used that really got me excited is the word responsible. I think when we talk about responsibility, we only look at it in the things of what we do and not in the aspect of legacy. And for you to say it's important for us to tell our stories, and while we tell our stories, we are being responsible. It's just me hearing you say it's a legacy. Like, this is what you're keeping for generations to come. It can become a movie, it can become anything, but you have the responsibility to leave that legacy for the people that come in. Chris, by ourselves.
I'm assuming you asked me to give some input on the question.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So
Yes, please.
yeah, so I was basically just going to say, I don't think there's much to add to that. I mean, he gave a very detailed answer. I would just add, just piggyback off of his response and say, if you don't tell your story, then you're really just silencing yourself, because we all see the world through our mind's eye, which means that we all have our programming, our subconscious beliefs about who we are and what the world is. And so when we tell stories, we're telling it through that lens, through our own specialized lens. And so your story is so unique because no one has ever written your story before. And I decided that it was important to tell my story because, like I said, I realized that it was no longer about me, but about the people's lives that I wish to impact. And so that's why I decided to write my story. And I thought it was important to get my voice out there. And because I recognize, what I look like, I recognize that I'm a African American female in the United States. And so people are looking at you in a certain light. And I recognize that people who do necessarily look like me or identify with my racial or ethnic background believe certain things about what's possible for them, because we've been conditioned that way. I just never felt like my identity was based on someone else's perception about who I am. And so hopefully from my story, people understand that as well about themselves, because I don't know the way. I can't tell people the only way, but I can tell you a way. I can give you insight and shed light on one experience. And I don't think there's no ultimate way. I think we all have to do the work to get to know who we are and get to know our divine purpose.
I'm very excited you use the word we have to do the work, because the next question I was going to ask you was about research. One of the things I really enjoyed about reading your book was the fact that you went into details. And I'm not just talking about the details of storytelling, I'm talking about the details of research. For example, in your book, you went as far as getting to know the people in your lineage, like people that lived before you, what their character traits were, and you found out about, is it your grandmother now?
Yeah, so I studied my lineage because I talked about in my book, in order to know where you're going, you must first understand where you've been. And being African American, we are told the stories about our ancestry, and a lot of African Americans don't really take the time to sit down and figure out where they come from. But you can't fault them because it's designed that way. And it's very difficult to do. It took me 6 years to find as much information as I found, and I'm still learning about my ancestry. But yeah, it's important to know where you come from. And so when I did the genealogy research, so I was going to courthouses, pulling deeds, checking out names. I found, my ancestors, and I found the one that actually migrated from West Africa to the United States. Her name was Harriet. And I don't know her last name, but I know that they migrated to North Carolina and then further down to Alabama. And so, yeah, then I did a DNA test and found out, about more about like my ancestry and about the areas in Nigeria and Cameroon, Congo, those areas, and also some European countries as well. But that's mostly just because of my ancestry. And so that's generally the makeup that you have of African Americans in the United States.
So coming off of that, I want to really dig into why we all chose the names we chose for our book. So the title of my book is Profitable Usherpreneur, and I know Mayokun's book is Can You Hear Me? And Chris's book is Crystal Clear. So I want to start with you, Mayokun. Why that topic? Why did you think it was important to name your book that? Why was it important to name your book Can You Hear Me? Like, can you hear me? Meaning, or what was the process for you deciding that, oh, this is the name I'm going to go with? Is it because somebody said it? Is it because you heard it somewhere? Is it because you were inspired to actually, or you heard that from a divine order? Why?
All right. Thank you, Clementina. So I believe the question essentially is, why did you choose that title? No, I didn't hear it from anyone. I would say it was obviously inspired. It was now there's a particular chapter of the book. I believe it's the middle chapter that the title of that chapter itself is the title of the book itself. Can you hear me? And it was because, again, this was my immigrant story. And I had come to a point at the time when I had come to realize that America, obviously, as you know, is quite troubled politically. Um, and that, I would say, reached certain heights in the last 4 years or five. That is rather unusual. And so, what I realized at the time was it looked like America had become a society where everyone was speaking at the same time and no one was really listening. You know, now that is very true for Americans and American politics in itself, in its all its ramifications. But I saw that it was also true for every other thing, and everything plays into politics, right? So, for an immigrant, for instance, one of the things that become my experience is the fact that there are questions that can tick off or that did tick off many immigrants, like where are you from, for example. And I thought that that was a harmless question. I always thought that that was a harmless question. But, and then I realized that they'll ask some people and then they'll get offended by it. It took me a little bit of time to really understand why they were offended. I still don't agree to the fact that I should be offended off the table, but again, now I understand the perception of people who get offended by that question because they say, oh, well, you're really asking me where I'm from. You're inferring that I don't fit in here for some reason or the other. And so that's why you're asking that question. And but the issue that I had with that was the fact that, like I said, I'm a very curious person. I'm curious about people. I'm curious about cultures. You know, I ask my friends from other parts of the world every time, where are you from? I mean, I know that Mohammed, for instance, my friend is from Egypt, but I wanted to know about the ethnicities in Egypt. So I do ask him, where in Egypt are you from? What language do they speak? And stuff like that. I asked that of my friends from other parts of the world. So I didn't immediately thought there was an issue if someone asked me where you from, or where you from originally, or what language is native to you. But the problem with that was, the truth is, some people would ask you, and what they're really inferring is what people get mad about. Like, it's the fact that they really infer. I mean, I've seen people say things, for instance, like, um, "Oh, you're from Nigeria. Oh, well, you speak rather well for someone from Nigeria. I've known other Nigerians, and they don't speak like this." And initially, you don't know whether to take that as a compliment, and then over time, you understand uh, the cultural difficulties in America, and you don't know if to take that, the wrong way and be angry about it. And it was just like all these things over my head. And I did tell a story in that book where a man I found out that I was from Nigeria. I was a project manager in this job, or site superintendent in this job. And I found out I was from Nigeria. And he said, "Oh, he would really like to learn about Nigeria. So maybe we can have lunch sometime," because he really wants to learn firsthand from someone who's from Nigeria, doesn't want to make the assumptions that everybody talks about, because he knows for sure that everything about Nigeria is not Boko Haram. And so he really wants to hear from me. And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, cool. I'll be honored to tell you." But I could see in, his demand, how courteous and how careful he was to even say that, "I'd like to learn about Nigeria from you." It was just the fact that everybody seemed to be on the edge. So I realized that sometimes some people are asking you, "Where are you from?" because they're curious. But some people are asking you, "Where you from?" because they're inferring that you don't fit in here. And, and sometimes it's just a lot of questions. It could be the same words, it could be the same lines, it could be exactly the same thing, but it could mean several different things. And so that's why I came up with the title. It was like, "Can you hear me? Like, can you really hear what I'm saying?" And the same thing on my side as an immigrant. There's something I described in the book as the immigrant paranoia, where you just live in this space until everything falls in place for you, and you just don't know what's next. Like, you literally can be here today and you can be off off on the plane tomorrow. And there's also the pain that some people legitimately feel when they feel that you're saying, "I don't belong here," or "I'm not smart enough to be here." Now, sometimes that can be literal, in the sense that you could be talking to people. I know people that have difficulties talking in groups, like in their offices and stuff like that, making presentations, because a lot of times people literally ask, "Can you come again? Can you come again?" And they've asked so many times that at this point it has eaten into their confidence, and it just they really can socialize as they're supposed to. So it was a combination of all of that that made me get to that title, "Can You Hear Me?" Of course, I touched on a couple of other things, and I felt like the American society is just always talking, and people need to understand. I did explain, for instance, one time when I went to a country club, because someone had recommended that I go to a country club, and there were only about two or three of us, dark skinned people in that country club. A country club is not a place where you expect to see a black person, especially a country club in Texas. But I went there for a Friday evening, and the reception I had from those guys, I could tell that they were trying to let me know that it's okay for me to be here. They gave me a free ticket to come in, they gave me a nice drink, they asked me to come back. This were a set of people, rednecks, that everybody had an idea about. But I felt like these guys were trying to say loud and clear to me that day, "We want to change this perception. We hope that you can come back." We really hope. When I told my sister-in-law that I went to a redneck country club, she freaked out. She was like, "Why the hell did you go to a redneck country club?" I'm like, "But it wasn't bad. It turned out right." I thought that it was for me to hear what those guys were saying, what those rednecks were saying in the country club. I thought a lot of people were trying to pass across a message. Some of them are truly good. Some of them are just what you think. But it was just putting all the cacophony of voices together was why I titled the book, "Can You Hear Me?"
Wow, that's amazing. As you were talking, it just occurred to me, there's this part of the scripture that Paul said that because I'm in chains, some people have become bolder to declare the gospel, while some people are preaching the gospel so that I can be in chains. Like, so and it came to this conclusion that whichever way, let the gospel be preached. So the fact that can you hear me? Like, so you can you can be in chains hear me, and people might just take that as, oh, I think I would no longer bother myself to speak, and while others could take that as a challenge to learn the way the community can actually understand them is truly inspiring. And I must say that that's the crystal clear, because that attracted me to the book. Like, I saw your name and I'm like, oh, the title of the book is crystal clear. So it's clear. Why did you choose that title for the book?
Yeah, thank you. I know it's a lot of people think, oh, like your name is Crystal, so of course you chose Crystal Clear. But I'm actually the name of the book, and I talk about it in my introduction. But I'm named after a river. So when my mom was pregnant with me, they lived in Miami, Florida, and she was working at Golden Corral, which is like all-you-can-eat buffet in the United States. I think it's mostly in the South. And she was working there, and she went into work, and no one knew my mom was pregnant at the time. And so my mom had a friend at the time named Miss Story. And Miss Story came up to my mom and she was just like, you know, Elaine, I had a dream that you were standing next to this crystal clear river. And the river was so clear that you could see right through it. And she said it was just flowing so beautifully. And she said that you were standing next to this river and you were holding hands with a little girl. And she described the little girl to my mom. And so, like, after Miss Story told my mom the story, they both paused. And my mom was just like, I'm pregnant. And then Miss Story was just like, I knew it, I knew it. And so my mom was like, if it's a girl, then I'll name her Crystal. And so I'm named after that river. And so my mom always tells me that my life is meant to flow like that crystal clear river. And whenever dams obstruct the flow, that they will, you know, diminish, they'll fall apart, and then my flow will return. And so the title of my book, Crystal Clear: A Journey of Self-Discovery, is just me realizing my namesake. It's me realizing that who I am is meant to flow. And so I really believe that coming into my awareness of what's the greatest gift from my creator, and now that I can share my awareness and share my story with others to help them on their journey of self-discovery. And obviously I'm still learning about myself. I'm still discovering, I'm still expanding every day, but I have a very solid foundation of who I am. And now that I have that foundation, it's like building anything, you need a solid foundation. So Crystal Clear Journey of Self-Discovery is just my becoming and my story of realizing who I am and why I was seen in that dream that day.
It's really interesting to see that when we have those experiences, there is no how you could have convinced somebody that this is why I'm named this way, except you tell the story. And I think it's important. I remember the first time I heard somebody say that everybody has a book in them. I actually did doubt that statement, because I felt like there's enough book in the world now. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, connection. Can you hear me, please?
It's a little muddled up, but we can kind of make out what you're saying at the end. Just kind of try to listen through and then make up what the question is.
Oh, so sorry about that. We test this thing all the time, and it's like when you get to use it, there's another story to it. So I was saying that it's interesting to see that there's no other people will get to know some aspects of our journey without us telling the story. And that is going to bring me to the content of the book. Now I'm taking you through the process of writing a book because I understand that it's possible there will be people that will listen or that are listening to us that may want to tell their story. Maybe they're not ready to write a book yet. They want to share on social media. They want to be part of platforms like this. What do you think is the most important thing for you to have to actually tell your story? What do you think is the most important thing? Anyone could take a go at that piece. What do you think is the most important thing for you to tell?
I think the question is, what's the most important thing that we need in order to tell our story? And so it's very interesting because I think that, and I hear people say all the time, like, I don't know how to write and I don't know how to tell a story. And it's so interesting because telling a story can come from several different avenues. You don't have to write a book to tell a story. Maybe you do a visual, or maybe you paint a picture. Maybe you are really good with poetry, so you write a poem. Telling a story comes in, you can express that in many different ways through a dance. And so for me and Mayokun, the way that we decided to tell our story was through a book. And for me, one thing that helped me was actually hiring a publishing coach because I'd never written a book before. No one in my family had written a book, but I had always been a writer. I just never really thought about publishing any of my work. And so I realized when I started writing my book 2 years before I actually published it that I had no idea where to start. And so I hired someone who had already did it, and they had guaranteed that it would be a bestseller if I just, basically just like followed their instructions because they had done it before and they understood the system. And to me, like getting a coach, and maybe it's just because I am a coach, but having a coach, having someone hold a vision for you and walk you through the process and hold you accountable, like you still have to do the work, but having someone to be there and say, this is a way, this is something that could help you when you're in the process of telling your story through a written form. That was priceless to me. And so the investment has honestly paid dividends and it's still paying dividends. So that would be one piece of advice that I would give to someone wishing to tell their story is whatever platform, whatever avenue you choose to tell your story, if you are lost in the process of how to do that, how to bring your vision forward, get with someone. You don't necessarily have to pay someone. There's always ways you could do it for free. There's YouTube videos. YouTube can teach you pretty much anything, but get with someone and ask them, how did you do it? Can you show me? How can I tell my story in this way as well?
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Crystal. Michael.
Yeah, basically, I believe that Crystal hit it up right there on the head. It's, you know, um, it will be very helpful for you to have someone who's done it show you the way. And like you said, that doesn't have to be paid. It could be on YouTube. The only thing I'll add to that is um, I think she actually touched on that too, which is at some point you just have to do the work. You really cannot substitute doing the work, no matter what you do. So sometimes even if you don't seem to have clarity or all the clarity about the story, now what you should still go ahead and do it. What I discovered in my personal experience was at some point I just had to publish, and my friend who was really like the accountability partner and the person who was pushing me on this. He had to get to the point where he said, no more editing. Like, we're not editing the game. Because I realized that I always had something I wanted to correct. I always had something I wanted to modify. I always felt like I could make something sound better. He probably had to get to the point where he yanked it off my hands and like, that's it. We're not modifying anything. So, it's okay. What I learned through that process is a lot of the chapters, a lot of the parts of the book, when I started writing them, I knew I kind of had like a better eye view of what I wanted the chapter to be, but I was very unsatisfied with the first draft. I knew that was never going to make it anywhere. So, but at least I had written something, and then I could go back to that and work on it. So, in addition to what Crystal said, which is it is very helpful for you to get a coach or to get some kind of instruction on how to go the process. I would just re-emphasize that eventually do the process, like do the work, start it, write a very crazy draft. If you have to, like, write a draft that you wouldn't read the next day, but just write it. Just, and like you said, it doesn't have to be a book. It's everything is a story. That's the simple truth. Everything around you is a story, and so just start it off. The first draft is probably going to be a bad draft, and perhaps that's true of even the most accomplished authors. But just write it, and then once you have that, I believe that it's going to give you the momentum to begin to continue to build on that and make it better.
Thank you so much for that, Mayokun. I think it's important for me to put it out there at this point that the way people come into a new year to say, "Oh, I'll write a book," I do not have that. At least in this year, I do not plan to have to write a book. The whole book came out of a conversation where somebody had written to me online and said that I follow your work, I follow what you do with Glorious Will Services, and I would love to read from you. Now, the interesting thing about this message is that this person is not trying to build an ushering business. This person is not even in the invest industry space, but in just said that I followed you, I see what you do, and I would love to read from you. And at that point, I knew that he was not just talking about me responding to his message, it was actually a goal. And that was like years before now, and I was just like, whatever. So I jumped on virtually every free course I could have on writing a book, but not with any sense of seriousness. I was just in those classes to cheer people up, tell them they could do it, and that was pretty much it for me. But when it came to this year, I'd seen this advert online, and somebody was saying you can write your book in 30 days, and I'm like, oh wow. So it got to the point of payment, and I'm like, no, I'm not ready to part with this money. And there and then it occurred to me that I'm going to spend the money anyway. So would I rather spend the money on something that I would call a legacy, something that after I've spent the money, I will not remember? And I paid for it, and that was just it. Like, say thank you to you. Like the network is taking me off.
I don't think I heard the last part of
Myocon's
that.
book title. Okay. I said I wanted to be sure that you can still hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Okay. So at this point, I would just like you to like say a word to people that are looking forward to figuring out life. One of the things I've heard people say is find your purpose, find your purpose, find your purpose, find your purpose. I really want you to just speak to that. What do you think is important for especially a young person to do? I know that a lot of young people are going to find these videos, and I hope that they have been inspired by what they are seeing or what they have said so far. But I really want you to just speak from your heart. What do you think is important for a young person to do? Is it that you have to find your purpose before you start life, or you start life understanding that you have a creator that is bigger than you, and if you can find him, then you will find your life? Or there are steps to follow. Just whatever you think that somebody should do to become better in their lives, please do share with us as we round up the section. Thank you. Who wants to go first, please?
Okay,
Okay,
Chris.
Michael.
Yeah, Crystal asked that I go first. I was certainly waiting for her. I was gonna just wait her into starting. Well, yeah. So I always approach a question like this with a lot of moderation because I don't suppose to have figured out life in its entirety myself. So I'm always very moderated when I try to approach that question. But one of the things that I definitely know that works for me is I believe that a young person should have a structure to their life. You know, a lot of times we don't have a big picture. We have dreams, we have hopes, we have big dreams as aware, but it's not all going to come together at once. But I believe that if that will come together, there has to be a structure to your life, and structure is the place I would say you should start from, and you would eventually be able to work into purpose and into that big thing. You know, and just tying that to this issue of storytelling, I believe that um, everything can come together with the right story. I believe that your life itself, some of the limitations that people have today as a result of the stories they have told themselves and reinforced to themselves. So, like initially, maybe they didn't even tell those stories to themselves. Maybe it was told to them by their experiences, by where they grew up, by the kind of disadvantages that was natural to the domain. There was nothing about their fault, but there was something about them reinforcing those stories to themselves that makes it true. And I think that is also true for everybody that broke out of that enclave, was the fact that they were able to tell a different story to themselves. And that's why I'm looking forward to reading Crystal's book. One of the books that have inspired me greatly in recent times is "Can't Hurt Me" by David Goggins. And it actually sounds very similar to Crystal's story in the sense that he also had a very challenging childhood and grew up in an abusive home, but pulled himself up essentially through immense discipline and structure, and was able to get a very meaningful life for himself. This is the first guy in American history to complete Allied Navy SEALs training, Army Rangers, Air Force tactical response. And if you know anything about those things, the kind of extreme discipline and extreme mental and physical strength that needs to, follow the person who was able to achieve those things. It was just extreme. But this was a guy who had all the same limitations and all the same difficulties that a lot of people have, and they never rise. But it got to a point where he told himself a different story, and began to structure his life according to the stories that he wanted his life to look like. So for me, it would just go back to that. I would say, tell yourself the right story about yourself. Read up about the right story, learn about the right story, and give yourself a structure. If you have a structure and you have the right story, then you can essentially, like someone would say, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. What I really don't like to go into world politics, but to a large extent, what China did or what China does is not to invent anything new, is to reinvent a lot of things that the United States have done. And because they have the market for it and they have the size and population for it, they seem to be able to double down and actually now begin to sell it to the world in cheaper prices. And that just skyrocketed the market. They didn't essentially start anything new. So that's the connection I'm gonna make with the right story, with something that someone has done before, wherever that comes from you. I hope it comes from an inspiring place, either because of your faith perspective and your worldview, whatever it is. If you tell yourself the right story and you build a structure according to those stories, you will eventually be able to walk into the kind of life that you hope for yourself.
Well, it's interesting that you will say this because the major things I wrote in the Profitable Usherpreneur about is structure, systems, and service. So I said if you have the structure, if you can figure out the system, and if you can treat service, which I said in the beginning, that book that service is a two-way street, meaning that it's the way you treat people and it's the way you allow people to treat you, which goes back to his whole storytelling. So it's very interesting that you touch on this, and I'm so grateful. I really want to say thank you for sharing your heart out. At this point, I want you to tell us where the book can be found, where can we find, can you hear me, and where can we.
All right. So I believe the question is where the book can be found. Amazon. If you type "Can you hear me?" an immigrant's memoir, and then my name, the author's name, Mayokun Adekola, it's right on Amazon.
Sorry, please, you may need to take that again, please.
Okay. Yeah. So I did say that it's on Amazon. Can you hear me? An immigrant's memoir, and it's right on Amazon. You can order either a soft copy or an actual hard copy, if whatever the preference is.
So can you let us know where we can connect with you? We want to follow you, other things you want us to know about you, if whatever, any other things you want us to know.
Okay, I guess
And also
Instagram
want
and
to know how we
Face.
can connect with you.
Yeah, I guess Instagram and Facebook. My Instagram is Mayokun Adekola, and then my Facebook is Adekola Love Me or my Adekola Love Me or Mayokun. I'm not sure you know a lot about me on Facebook because if I'm not talking about Nigerian politics, I'm just joking around. But yeah, Instagram would be the good place, which is my at Mayokun Adekola on Instagram.
Wow. Thank you so, so much. Dropped off. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Michael. And it's just interesting that this conversation went this way. And I'm excited about how it went because I must say that when I started out to write my book, I didn't so the person that reached out to me online to say I could do a beautiful job with the book cover. That every time I've heard people say to me, "Oh, your book cover is lovely," and it's just because. So with this, I would like to say thank you so much for attending this particular edition of the summit. We are very excited that you joined us today. Tomorrow it's another day. Tomorrow we're going to be having two sessions. The first session is going to be happening with the business owners and creatives, why the last session we're going to be talking everything about money. And so I look forward to seeing you. I don't want to say a special shout out to Vidana for providing me with the dress I wore today as a gift for my book launch. I really want to say thank you. I do not take it for granted that your company decided to beautify me, and I want to say to everyone that is watching, my name is Clementina Busayo. I've been talking with Adekola Mayokun, who is the author of Can You Hear Me? An Immigrant Memoir. And I've also been in conversations with Christina Harrell, who is also the author of the book Crystal Clear, From Public Housing to Ivy League. This is just to let you know that there is nothing that is impossible to you, and you should learn to tell your story the way you want it told, so that you can leave the legacy that can inspire others, empower others, and help them find direction. I'm very happy and I'm excited because Glorious Wills Ushering is in the background of this to make it happen. It's the Entrepreneur Summit 2021, and we'll be back again right on this channel, same time tomorrow, where we'll be talking with our amazing speakers. Do remember, if you're watching the replay, to leave a comment, and if you have any question, please feel free to drop the details of your questions, and I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day.